Fred VanVleet has revealed the real reason as to why he was absent from the Toronto Raptors prior to his return last night, so we'll discuss that, as well as Will Barton giving high praise to the Raptors organization as the team's newest signing, and Tyrese Maxey named the Raptors his favorite team to play on the road, in the entire NBA. So lots of stuff to break down, all of that and more. So let's dive in the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is the real reason why Fred VanVleet missed time. Now, Fred VanVleet, obviously there was a lot of speculation about some of our top guys getting traded ahead of this year's deadline. That did not happen. We acquired Jakob Poeltl, and Fred VanVleet showed off a lot of chemistry with Big Yak prior to the All-Star break. But then the All-Star break happened, and then Fred VanVleet was not available for any of the games, following the All-Star break prior to our game against Chicago last night due to personal reasons. This was reported by Lewinberg, basically all the Raptors beat reporters. But there's some speculation as to why Fred VanVleet wasn't with the team, and a lot of it was pointed to Fred VanVleet's wifey being pregnant, as he called her in this interview, which we'll talk about. But that was a part of it, but Fred VanVleet further explained as to the reasons why he wasn't available for this game, because I did see some people saying it was a little bit longer than a lot of players usually take due to the birth of a child. He took 3 games off rather than the one usually players take. I think if you're having a birth of a child, you can be excused for an extended period of time, but that's just me. But this is what Fred VanVleet had to say, the real reason why he missed some time with the Toronto Raptors.
You know what I mean? Really, I had a hell of a break. I didn't get to obviously go on a trip or nothing, but I was home, spending time with my family. Wifey was getting close, so we knew it could come at any time. It was a weird week, man. I had a death in the family. I had a birthday and the birth of my child all in the same couple of days. So it was just one of those things, man. It just puts you back in place and gives you great perspective on life. And ultimately, I have an incredible life, and I'm extremely blessed. So, but yeah, I'm happy to be back at work.
So it's a wild week for Fred VanVleet. He did have the birth of his child, so congratulations. The reports were right on that front. It was his birthday, and he also had a death in the family. So wishing the best for Freddie VanVleet, sending condolences his way. But, a wild sort of week, and he did seem happy to be back in action for the Toronto Raptors. And while he didn't shoot the greatest in his return game, which makes sense, probably having a child, everything, all that stuff going on, getting your sleep right, getting everything rocking on that front, the offense looks a whole lot better with Fred VanVleet back into the lineup, and he does look a little bit recharged, a little bit refreshed, at least physically out there on the court. He's moving a little bit better. He's not moving that sort of limp we saw him run with earlier in the season. So a healthy Fred VanVleet is a major asset for this team to end off this season, and I'm excited to make a little playoff run with our former All-Star point guard. Right, we'll make a push back there hopefully next season, but Fred VanVleet back into the lineup. But that's not the only addition the Raptors got back or got received for this game last night, and Will Barton made his debut for the Toronto Raptors, and he had some high praise for the Toronto Raptors in his practice scrum today. And for people that don't know, Will Barton is a 3-point shooting bucket getter that we just picked off the buyout market, who was requested a buyout from the Washington Wizards, and now is coming into this Raptors team looking to be a key piece for this squad. And he had a lot of interesting quotes in his post-practice sort of presser today, basically talking about how the Toronto Raptors are a team where he sort of chose a mix of wanting to go to a winning culture, a winning team, as well as getting some run, getting some opportunity for that squad. So that was a couple of the factors that mixed into him choosing Toronto, as well as assistant coach Earl Watson giving high praise to the city and really pushing for him to end up choosing Toronto as his teams, as he was sort of mulling through different organizations to sign with ahead of this year's buyout deadline. And Will Barton, again, phenomenal acquisition, phenomenal player to bring in, sort of fits exactly what the Toronto Raptors need in terms of a guy that can come off the bench, score very well, and he had some high praise for the Toronto Raptors himself, in that post-game presser, or post-practice presser, whatever they call it, and this is essentially what he had to say.
Jakob Poeltl, and now bringing Gary off the bench, it's just a lot of firepower, so I just wanted to add any depth I could to this team. Definitely a team that is way better than their record. Everyone knows that around the league. Very talented, well-coached, well-run organization. So hopefully we can just keep getting wins and have our record better and get to the playoffs.
So, High praise there for the Toronto Raptors, saying their team that's a lot better than their current record shows. We have a lot of talent. Talked about Gary Trent Jr. now coming off the bench and the firepower that they can have, on this team. And it's really exciting now to have a little bit of depth going on with this roster, right? It seems like over the past 3 seasons, we've looked at the players play in preseason and stuff. Look at the acquisitions. I mean, Juancho Hernangomez is pretty hyped up amongst Raptors land. It looks like we'll have a little bit of depth, and then the bench just doesn't really produce. But now, with the starting unit of Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal, and Jakob Poeltl, and then adding Gary Trent Jr. to the bench to knock down some threes, paired alongside Will Barton, two absolute flamethrowers to come into the game and get us some buckets, along with the bigs and Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher. That's a real legitimate 9-man rotation that Nick Nurse can be relied upon to actually play minutes. I mean, the distribution of minutes were actually great last night. Even Thaddeus Young got a lot of run in the game previous, and we'll talk about him later in this video. But I don't know, I'm very encouraged about this Raptors team going forward into this season, especially with this acquisition of Will Barton here right now. I'm stoked. And he even got 4 minutes, shockingly enough. And he even talked about in this interview about how he was basically heard that he was going to the Raptors the same time. It was made official the same time that we all did, getting those tweets from Shams and Woj and stuff. But the fact that he was able to play, flew to Toronto, got the jersey pressed, was ready to go, even got stretched, right? Probably didn't even know he was going to be available to that game tonight, right? Ready to rock. It was impressive. Only played 4 minutes, but I don't think that's going to be a true indication in terms of how many minutes he's going to get with this team once he sort of has a time to go over the offense and defensive system. So really excited to see how he plays. And we got a couple of games against his former team, the Washington Wizards, this week. So hopefully really starts off with a bang for the Toronto Raptors and gets us a couple W's against his former team. So shout out to Will Barton, the newest Toronto Raptor. But the next thing we're taking a look at is Tyrese Maxey saying Toronto is his favorite place to play. Now, Tyrese Maxey is a guy that, sure, he plays for the Philadelphia 76ers. And we all know the rivalry that we've had, especially the playoffs we had in the most recent season, the hatred a lot of Raptors fans have for Joel Embiid, and those rosters especially. Joel kind of got back at us for the Kawhi shot in 2019. This postseason with the crazy fadeaway three-pointer he hit in Game 3 in the postseason, to put the Sixers up 3-0 against the Raptors, but there's one guy that I think a lot of Toronto Raptors fans kind of like, even if Tyrese Maxey's comments don't sort of indicate this. But Tyrese Maxey, even though he absolutely cooks us every time he plays against us, right? He's a guy that, just whether it's a part of it is Fred VanVleet just being injured when we go up against him. He's absolutely lighting Fred VanVleet on fire. But a part of it, is just him knocking down shots, being comfortable, just having Toronto's number. And he said Toronto's his favorite destination to play. And it's not just because he has big nights, he has big moments. He went on this podcast, the podcast for the youth, the young person's podcast. I didn't pull the clip for it for copyright stuff, but interesting name for a podcast. But went on there and basically talked about how he loves the energy that Toronto Raptors fans bring to these games, because he talked about all the angst and the energy we throw towards Joel Embiid when we're playing against him, all the airplane stuff, all the roasts being thrown out that way. And that carries on to Tyrese Maxey. One day he told an anecdote about how he ordered Uber Eats up there up in Toronto, and the guy, the Uber Eats driver, gave the food, "Oh, this is for you. My wife absolutely hates you." So it's lots of jokes there. Tyrese Maxey, him and Scotty Barnes had that little bond from the All-Star game. We almost acquired him back in 2020 when we were going to trade away Kyle Lowry, and it felt like we could have actually nipped him off the Philadelphia 76ers, but Masai Ujiri, rather than just wanting Tyrese Maxey, wanted Matisse Thybulle as well as draft compensation for Kyle Lowry. So unfortunately, Tyrese Maxey couldn't be a Toronto Raptor, even though I am pretty happy with Precious Achiuwa, even if Maxey's the better player right now. But I don't know. How you guys feeling about Tyrese Maxey sort of throwing the Toronto Raptors as his favorite road team to play against? Let me know that in the comment section below. But the final thing we're taking a look at is Nick Nurse wants more minutes for Thaddeus Young at the power forward position. So Thaddeus Young finally got some run, and I've been saying this. Thaddeus Young is a great role player to play alongside good players, right? When the team's rolling, when people are cooking, Thaddeus Young can be a ceiling raiser for your team. He's not much of a floor raiser, right? If we're not hitting shots whatsoever, if our team is just not at the level it really should be, then Thaddeus Young isn't going to turn your bad team into something good. But he could be a part Not obviously the focal point, the central reason, but he could be a part of the reason why a good team turns to great, right? He's a ceiling player. He can complement star guys, right? Space the floor, make good decisions, make hustle plays, and now he's actually able to play his more natural position, as Nick Nurse basically came out in his practice scrum and said he wants to see Thaddeus Young play more of the 4 because he sort of had to play out of position his entire tenure this season with the lack of center, right? Thaddeus Young is kind of the de facto 5 prior to acquiring Jakob Poeltl this year, and the lineups with Jakob Poeltl and Thaddeus Young, Nick Nurse sort of was intrigued by. He was really happy with the couple stints Thaddeus Young had out there on the court against the Chicago Bulls last night. So, we talked about the rotations and the minutes distribution earlier in this podcast, but the fact that we don't have to play Siakam, Fred, Gary OG, Scotty 40-plus minutes a night, right? Now with the acquisition of Will Barton, with Gary Trent Jr. moving to the bench, obviously Jakob Poeltl coming in, and now Nick Nurse trusting Thaddeus Young to play less out of position than he has been in so far this season. It's an encouraging time to be a Toronto Raptors fan, so definitely keep a lookout for that for the next Toronto Raptors game, but if you guys want to stay up to date regarding the Toronto Raptors, subscribe to the Raptors Digest. And if you guys want to bet on the Toronto Raptors, definitely check out the Cool Bet Sportsbook. There are sportsbook regulated in Ontario available all across Canada. You bet every single Toronto Raptors game, NBA game, really any sport in general. And they've been really good to the podcast. So, it's free to sign up. Use the link down below. And you guys can get yourself the best lines of really anything you want to bet on. So shout out to Cool Bet for supporting the podcast. Shout out to you guys for making it this far. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.